there's a moment you know too well. That first flicker of recognition, quiet but magnetic, a calm that feels almost sacred. Someone enters your world, and for a moment, everything inside you exhales. It's not excitement you feel, but peace. The kind of peace that feels like it's been waiting for you. Their voice softens the noise in your head. Their eyes make time slow down just enough to notice you're breathing again. You tell yourself, this time, it's different. It feels calm, safe, almost destined, like the universe has finally stopped testing you and started guiding you. You start to believe that maybe, after everything, you've found the person who sees you without asking you to perform. But then, quietly, the rhythm shifts. Not in one sudden motion, just in small, almost invisible ways. A slower reply. A distant laugh. A pause that used to be filled with warmth now stretches a little too long. And you start to feel that hollow silence where closeness used to live. You tell yourself it's fine that connection always ebbs and flows, but deep down, a familiar ache begins to whisper. You know this pattern. You've felt this before. You start replaying every moment, every sentence, every breath, looking for the mistake you must have made. But it isn't about what you said. It's about what you keep choosing. You keep finding the ones who can't stay. The ones who love like a tide, beautiful from a distance, but impossible to hold. And when they start to drift, you reach out even more certain that if you just love them harder, they'll finally stay. You think patience is proof of love. You think understanding is strength. You think if you're gentle enough, they'll feel safe enough to meet you halfway. But they don't. Not because you are unworthy of love, but because your nervous system learned long ago to chase what's familiar, not what's safe. You've mistaken intensity for intimacy. You've mistaken unpredictability for passion. And so you find yourself drawn to the ache again and again because the ache is what you've always known. You confuse stillness for loss. You confuse peace for boredom. And somewhere along the way, you began to believe that love only counts when it hurts a little, when you have to earn it, when you have to reach across distance to feel it. But it isn't love that hurts. It's the repetition, the echo of old wounds replaying themselves in new faces. And until you see that clearly, every new spark will burn the same way quietly at first, beautifully for a while, then fading into the same silence that started it all. You grew up learning that love meant reaching for attention that was half offered, reaching for affection that had to be earned. And even now, when someone shows up steady, your body doesn't quite know what to do with it. Stillness feels suspicious. Consistency feels like distance. You find yourself waiting for the dip, for the silence, for the shift, because somewhere inside, love and uncertainty became the same language. So when they start to pull away, you don't walk out. You lean in. You double your effort, soften your tone, explain your feelings in gentler words. You start reading between the lines that were never written for you. You try to fill in the silence with meaning, to rescue connection from the edge. And the more they withdraw, the smaller you make yourself, hoping they'll find comfort in your understanding. You tell yourself this is compassion, but really, it's survival dressed as grace. You've mistaken control for safety, because control is predictable, and predictability is the only piece your nervous system remembers. The truth is, your body doesn't crave chaos. It craves what's familiar, even when what's familiar hurts. And so, you keep reaching for those who can't reach back. You keep pouring yourself into hollow spaces, hoping love will echo loud enough to sound like belonging. You've been conditioned to equate pain with proof. The harder you try, the more it must matter. And yet, every time you overextend, you lose a piece of yourself in the process. You begin to confuse exhaustion for devotion. You call it holding space, but it's really holding on. You call it understanding, but it's really waiting to be chosen. The hardest part is that the cycle feels honest. It feels real because it mirrors your oldest memories of love, the ones where affection was rare, conditional, or quiet enough to make you question if it was ever there at all. Your mind knows you deserve more, but your body doesn't believe it yet. Your body still leans toward the ache because the ache feels like home. But here's the quiet truth you keep missing. You don't need to earn calm. You don't have to chase what's steady. Peace doesn't require proof. Love isn't something you secure by shrinking. The right kind of love won't demand that you disappear to deserve it. It won't reward your silence or punish your need. It will meet you halfway, honestly, softly. And when it does, it will feel unfamiliar at first, almost uncomfortable in its simplicity, because real safety doesn't announce itself. It just stays. And maybe that's the hardest lesson of all, learning to stop running toward the ones who leave and start standing still long enough to be found. There comes a moment when you begin to notice the pattern from the inside. Not as something the world keeps doing to you, but as something your body keeps reenacting without your permission. A quiet pull toward familiarity that feels like intuition when it's really memory. You sense it in the way your chest tightens when someone hesitates, in the way your mind scans for danger when connection feels too steady, in the way your body braces for loss long before anything has actually gone wrong. You start to see how easily you shape yourself around other people's comfort, how naturally you swallow your needs so you won't risk being seen as demanding, how often you dim your excitement so you won't overwhelm someone who already gives so little. You call it patience, but it's really a reflex. You call it understanding, but it's really fear. You call it compassion, but it's really the oldest version of you trying to survive. Somewhere deep inside, you still believe love is something you earned, something you win by being agreeable, predictable, unproblematic, something you hold on to by making yourself small enough to fit whatever space someone else gives you. And so you gravitate toward people who offer almost enough, almost present, almost caring, almost committed, almost choosing you. There is something addictive about almost. It keeps you waiting for the moment they finally turn toward you with certainty. It keeps you believing you can love them into emotional safety. It keeps you convinced that if you can just be softer, quieter, safer, they'll stay. But you are not craving them. You are craving the feeling of finally being chosen. You are craving the one thing you never received consistently: reassurance. Their inconsistency becomes a puzzle you're determined to solve. Their silence becomes a test you hope to pass. Their distance becomes a wound you believe you can heal if you just love gently enough. But you cannot outlove someone's avoidance. You cannot negotiate your way into someone's capacity. You cannot shrink yourself into a version they are capable of holding. And even as you keep trying, something inside you knows the truth. You feel it in the way your body pulls back before your mind admits it. You feel it in the ache that arrives the moment the warmth disappears. You feel it in the repetition, the same story playing out with different faces. But patterns are not prophecies. They are habits of the heart, not predictions of the future. They repeat because they are familiar, not because they are destiny. You choose what reminds you of home, even if home was lonely. You choose what feels like love, even if love was unpredictable. You choose what feels true, even when it was never healthy. But you are not broken for wanting connection. You are not foolish for hoping someone might stay. You are not naive for offering softness. It's simply time to stop confusing the ache with intimacy. It's time to stop mistaking emotional scarcity for passion. it's time to recognize that love doesn't arrive through suffering. There is a version of love that stays without being chased. A version of love that meets you without being convinced. A version of love that chooses you because you exist, not because you perform. And when you finally believe you deserve that, the pattern begins to lose its power. There's a part of you that still believes love is something that happens around you, not to you. As if you're a visitor in your own relationships. As if everyone else received a manual that you somehow missed. You watch people move through connection with ease, asking for what they want, expressing how they feel, letting themselves be held without apology. And you wonder how they do it, how they speak their needs without fear, how they believe they deserve closeness without having to earn it. Meanwhile, you measure yourself against every moment. You analyze every sentence you speak. You filter every emotion that rises inside you. You treat your heart like something fragile that might scare people away if you're not careful. You worry that you're too much, too emotional, too intense, too honest. So you choose silence over expression. You choose understanding over being understood. You choose stability over truth. But the truth is, you learned early on that vulnerability wasn't safe. Your feelings weren't met with comfort. Your needs weren't met with care. Your fear wasn't met with reassurance. So you adapted. You made yourself small. You made yourself manageable. You made yourself easy to love, even if it meant loving yourself less in the process. And that survival strategy followed you into adulthood. It shows up every time you stay quiet when something hurts. Every time you pretend not to notice the distance growing. Every time you convince yourself that wanting more makes you unreasonable. You learned to abandon yourself before anyone else could. And now you call that emotional maturity. You call it respect. You call it protecting the relationship. But really, it's protecting yourself from the fear of loss by losing yourself first. You don't realize how often you disappear in the name of connection. How often you hold your breath so someone else can breathe easier. How often you sacrifice your voice so the relationship won't feel heavy. You've learned to love by subtraction, removing the parts of you that feel inconvenient. But love isn't something you survive. It's something you inhabit. It's something that expands you, not reduces you. It's something that lets you take up space without fear of being pushed aside. And yet, when someone finally offers you real presence, the kind that doesn't flinch when you feel deeply you tense, you wait for the shift. You wait for the withdrawal. You wait for the moment the other shoe drops. Because safe love feels unfamiliar. It feels suspicious. It feels too steady to trust. But that discomfort isn't a warning, it's a wound. A wound that's healing. A wound that's learning a different language. And maybe that's the quiet turning point you've never allowed yourself to see. Love that stays isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't chase or vanish or test your limits. It shows up quietly, steadily, consistently, the way certainty does. And the moment you stop abandoning yourself to keep others close is the moment the right kind of love finally has room to reach you. There's a quiet shift that happens when you stop chasing love and start noticing yourself. At first, it feels like nothing, just a faint pause in your chest, a softness in your breath, a small voice asking, "What if it doesn't have to hurt?" You're not used to that question. You're used to enduring. You're used to holding on long after the warmth has faded. You're used to mistaking persistence for devotion. But something subtle begins to unravel. You start recognizing the moments when you disappear, the moments when you apologize for having needs, the moments when you hold your sadness behind your teeth so no one feels burdened by your heart, the moments when silence feels safer than honesty. These aren't flaws, they're wounds. Wounds that taught you to survive by shrinking. For the first time, you begin to wonder what it would feel like to stay present with yourself instead of abandoning yourself. To listen to your discomfort instead of rationalizing it away. To trust the heaviness in your chest instead of overriding it. To move toward people who feel steady, not thrilling, supportive, not unpredictable. And this curiosity, this tiny shift toward your own inner world is where healing begins. It doesn't come as a dramatic moment. It comes as 100 small choices. The choice to text back slower instead of rushing to prove your loyalty. The choice to speak a boundary even when your voice trembles. The choice to walk away from half-love instead of convincing yourself you can make it whole. The choice to sit with loneliness instead of running back to what broke you. These choices are quiet. They don't make noise, but they rebuild you. They show you your heart has always deserved more than waiting rooms dressed as relationships. You start to realize that the people who made you feel hard to love were simply unable to love in ways that were soft. Their limits were never a reflection of your worth. Their distance was never a mirror of your flaws. Their inconsistency was never proof that you needed to try harder. And as you recognize this, the ache begins to lose its power. The familiar pull starts to weaken. The stories you once believed about yourself start to unravel thread by thread. You learn that love is not earned by disappearing. Love is not secured by suffering. Love is not proven by staying when something inside you is begging to leave. There is a version of you that does not chase. A version of you that does not beg. A version of you that no longer molds yourself to the edges of someone else's emotional capacity. A version of you that stops trying to rescue people who have no desire to meet you. And you begin to feel that version waking up, quietly, slowly, gently, like morning light creeping in through a door you once believed would always stay closed. You're not fully there yet. You don't need to be. Healing isn't a sprint, it's a returning. A returning to the parts of you that were never broken. A returning to the love you kept giving away so easily. A returning to yourself at last. And as you return, something inside you whispers the truth you've been waiting to hear. You were worthy all along. There comes a point where you finally pause long enough to see the truth beneath all the patterns you've been repeating. Not the truth about them, the distant ones, the unpredictable ones, the ones you kept choosing as if they were the only option. But the truth about you, about what you've survived, about what you've been carrying, about what you've been calling love because it's the only version of love you were ever taught to recognize. And that truth is simple. You have never been the problem. Your capacity for depth isn't a flaw. Your longing isn't neediness. Your hope isn't weakness. Your desire to be close is not something you need to apologize for. What you've been calling too much has always been exactly the amount someone safe would have cherished. But when your heart learned about love through silence, distance, or unpredictability, it began to mistake tension for connection. It began to confuse emotional labor with commitment. It began to believe that being chosen was something you had to earn by being endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly available. So for years, you tried to love people into loving you back. You tried to become easy, quiet, flexible, invulnerable. You thought if you absorbed enough, they would soften. If you understood enough, they would stay. If you loved them hard enough, they would finally feel safe enough to love you too. But that was never your job. It was never your responsibility to heal someone else's unavailability. It was never your purpose to fit into the small space they made for connection. You were never meant to shrink to be held. And recognizing that isn't bitterness, it's clarity. Clarity that shows you the difference between love that depletes and love that restores. Between love that confuses and love that steadies. Between love that makes you disappear and love that makes you more fully yourself. You start to see that the love you've been waiting for isn't intense or dramatic or destabilizing. It doesn't make your chest tighten or your mind race. It doesn't make you question your worth every time someone pulls away. Real love, the kind you've always deserved, feels like exhaling. It feels like being met. It feels like a quiet yes in the space where you used to brace for a no. And maybe for the first time, you realize the point was never to make unavailable people stay. The point was to understand why you kept reaching for them in the first place, and to choose differently now. To choose steadiness over intensity. To choose reciprocity over fantasy. To choose the version of you who trusts your own worth more than the chase. Healing doesn't erase your past. It just stops it from choosing your future. And as you step forward, slower, steadier, more awake, you begin to feel a deeper truth rising inside you. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong people. And now, at last, you're learning to ask yourself.